Okay, so now we're going to consider fiscal policy. Three aspects of fiscal policy. One, how the budget is formulated. Second, how the debt is related to the deficit. And third, how the deficit itself depends on the state of the economy. Let's begin with the budget process. There has been over the years kind of a regular order to the federal budget process in the United States, and it's that process where fiscal policy is actually made. Usually you have a proposal that's made by the president in late January of each year. That budget proposal is based on economic assumptions prepared by economists working in the White House, parts of the executive branch, because the budget itself depends on the state of the economy. After that proposal, the Congress deliberates, decides what to do, and they pass a budget. If that's signed by the president, it's almost always different from the original proposal. You can consider an example from the year 2011 when the fiscal year 2012 budget was proposed, and here's a picture of that. The data show federal spending as a share of GDP. And remember, spending includes not only purchases of goods and services, but also transfer payments, things like Social Security and unemployment compensation. On the vertical axis, you have percent, so we're looking at federal spending as a percentage of GDP. The blue line gives you the recent history going back to 2000. You can see how spending as a share of GDP rose in the early 2000s, and then as the financial crisis got deep, raised substantially. The budget which was proposed in 2011 is shown in red, and that pertained to the year 2012, but also years out into the future shown by the red line. That was the original proposal of the administration that year. After a lot of debate in Congress, in fact 2011 was a very contentious debate year, it ended up in something called the Budget Control Act, labeled with the black line. You can see that was actually substantially below the original proposal. So it's an example how the deliberation results in a budget which is different from what was originally proposed. It's just one example. There's another difference between what's really originally proposed and what actually happened, and that is the actual budget is different from what was passed or signed. That's because events take place after the budget is put into place. There could be an economic recession, which would mean tax revenues would go down or spending would go up, and that would affect the budget and the deficit. Or there could be an anticipated need for supplemental spending. It could be a hurricane damage, or earthquake, or a war, in which case that wasn't originally budgeted for, but would have to be a supplemental spending increase. So that's the usual process. You can illustrate this process with a little line here, and this is an example of President Obama's budget for the year 2014. It was originally proposed early in the year, submitted a budget. You could see there it was in April, a little bit late that year. And the House and Senate, they passed their own budget called budget resolutions. And the fiscal year for 2014 begins on October 1st. It's noted there by the arrow. This particular year, the whole process broke down because there was no budget ready by October 1st. And in fact, the government shut down for a while the Congress and the administration debated what to do. There was eventually an agreement to continue with the government open, but no resolution on the budget. And so as of late 2013, they were still debating it. By early 2014, the president has to submit a new budget for the following year, and so now you've got to simultaneously discuss the current year budget, the next year budget, and that's added to a considerable degree of uncertainty. The regular process, the regular order is not working at this point in time as it has in the past and as we hope it would in the future to reduce uncertainty. The debates that are taking place, here's an example of the difference of opinion of what the Senate wants to do and the House wants to do. Again, you see the blue line, which is the historical spending levels as a share of GDP. As you can see here, the Senate budget has spending remaining higher than the House budget, which continues to reduce it. There's also a difference in the proposal on revenues. You can see that the revenues that the Senate is recommending are higher than the revenues of the House. That's because the Senate is recommending some tax increases. So there's a considerable difference between what's being proposed, and that's why it's taken a long time to settle it. But that's the nature of these discussions. People have difference of opinion. We try to work it out in the democratic process. So that's the budget process, and that's really where fiscal policy gets decided one way or another. It's just not like just pushing a button, shifting a curve. This occurs in the real world with people debating what to do frequently in very polarized or partisanship ways.